Hey, metalheads, welcome in. It's a special edition of First Look. How about a concert review? That's right. I'm here with my producer, Michael Kenobi. He dons Lorna Shore. I don Mastodon, and the only one missing is Gojira. But that was the set that we were able to see on April 20th at the Concord Pavilion. And we're going to give you the full rundown. And first and foremost, Michael, it was so fun to be able to finally get together. I mean, we usually meet this way, but to actually be together, take a drive down to the Bay Area, and see a show that represented both you and I, and just kind of all meshed together.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What a fantastic experience. And I mean, such a cool venue. I mean, I've never really been to like anywhere really near the Bay Area. So like it was, admittedly, when I saw that it was out there, it was a little daunting. But taking that drive out there was actually pretty smooth sailing. And then again, the show was, I mean, we'll get into it, was peak. Very good.
It was primo. It was primo. Yeah, so this was good because, like I said, two worlds really coming together because the reason for this show, by the way, this is not your normal show. We're we kind of go off the beaten path a little bit, which I think is kind of fun to do and stuff. And, you know, First Look is built on new heavy metal that primarily is brought to me by this guy, okay? And so then what I do is I just give raw reaction. I'm the old metalhead. So when we had this opportunity to be able to get tickets to Mastodon, Gojira, and Lorna Shore, it was like magic in heaven because Lorna Shore represents for this show the beginning. And maybe you can explain that, Michael.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's literally the first video that we covered. It was, I mean, we had talked about this show. I know we've touched on in the past. We talked about this kind of show for a while. And then when I heard that song, I was like, man, this would be perfect for a reaction video. And it just kind of worked out. And then to your point, when the concert is announced that it's two of your favorite bands and then Lorna Shore, one of my current favorite bands, it was just kind of like, again, to your point, perfect.
Yeah, it was meant to be. And so we get Mastodon and Gojira. And what was nice about that is I had just seen Gojira. They had opened up for the Deftones. So, and I've always known with Gojira, they've never done me wrong. Okay, so I knew their set was going to be great. But they've never played with Mastodon, which is my ultimate band. But with Mastodon, I'm coming off a disappointment because I wasn't such a big fan of their latest album. In fact, when they rolled around on that tour, I skipped it for the first time in probably, I don't know, my gosh, probably about 10 years. So that was hard. So I was ready to just make this happen. And maybe we should go vice versa. And maybe you share like how much you knew about Mastodon and Gojira going into the show, because that was quite, I thought, a cool thing.
Yeah, so similarly for you watching the video, like I had no experience with either Gojira or Mastodon. Like I knew the name, and I'm sure somewhere along the way I've heard songs of theirs, but in terms of like what I have downloaded on my phone, it's none for them. And so it was a really cool opportunity to see them not only just for the first time, but live for the first time. It's pretty rare, I guess. Well, in terms of like bands of that scale, where like the first time you see them is in the concert setting, and what a great way to like take in both of those bands.
Well, and I think another thing that was in our favor, this was the second date. They had opened up in Portland, I believe the night or two before, and this was their second stint. So we knew we were just going to get the fresh version of these three bands. So let's kick it off with Lorna Shore. And I think it's important. Everybody loves the set list, right? Yes. So they kicked it off with Sun Eater, followed by Curse to Die, Into the Earth. And then we thought it was really cool how they finished the show. We were like wondering, are they going to do all three songs of Pain Remain? And of course, that's how they ended. Did you like that at all?
Yeah, I mean, like, it was a very concise set. And it's funny to say that when you consider the fact that, like, those three songs that they ended with take over 30 minutes of time just between the three. So it was a nice short set. And, like, we will kind of dive into, like, when it comes time to score and, like, kind of the more specifics of that set in particular. But in terms of, like, a track listing, especially for an opening band where they didn't really have a terrible amount of time, I thought it was a great way for them to kind of introduce themselves to an audience who was largely not there for them.
Right.
So I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and see, this is what's great about like bands like Mastodon and Gojira is being able to kind of bring in their little brother, right?
Right.
I don't know how much they know about Lorna Shore, but they know enough to say, hey, this is a great opportunity. And you got to remember, when you're the opening band, Not everybody's there. It's usually daylight, right? We couldn't even see the video screens that were up on the left and right side. So you're working. There's a lot working against you.
Yeah.
And I felt pretty good that Will Ramos and the crew did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. Like, they are such a theatrical band. I mean, if their videos weren't any indicator, if how they go in and out of a song wasn't any indicator, they are such a theatrical band. And fortunately or unfortunately, like, again, because they were playing like in broad daylight, it did kind of change it just a little bit, and like not being able to kind of take better advantage of all the production that went into the other two sets. I think it kind of it affected it just a little bit, but all that to say, like, to your point, everything that they were like kind of like working with, I think they did a really good job outside of the, as we kind of talked about, like the nervous commentary between every single song. You know what I mean? And again, I understand like why that's there. As someone who does also speaks on microphone for a living, like I understand why that's there. But yeah, I thought they, again, with the cards they were dealt, being the very first band on that lineup, playing an outdoor venue, I thought they killed it.
Yeah, between the 6 songs, Will was talking every time, and he was just trying to get a temperature check on the band and, you know, trying to rouse them up and everything. And then he would just go into it, and then the pit would begin, you know? So it's like, I was saying to you, and by the way, we'll talk about our seats, which were amazing for what we paid for and everything. But I felt like they could have just played all 6 songs and not said a word, and everything would have been great. But this is, I think, part of the learning process.
Yeah.
Having seen enough bands, I like bands that just bring it. There's not a lot of commentary. You let 3, 4, 5 songs go. Maybe you say hello, and then you just get into the next one. So
that's right.
I think that was the only drawback from Lorna Shore.
Yeah, I'm with you. And again, to your point, I mean, like, again, as little experience as I have with Gojira and Mastodon, like, it was very evident that they've been doing this for a while. Like, they were able to, like, sit back into the, like, not necessarily arrogance of it, like, but to be like, yeah, like, we're here, like, we're the band you came to see. You know what I mean? And, like, again, I say, fortunately or unfortunately, like, Lorna doesn't necessarily have that status. Like, he even said, like one of the statements that he had, or like, I'm going to paraphrase, but that stood out to me. He was like, who in the crowd is familiar with Lorna Shore? It gets a decent sized pop. And he's like, oh, that's surprising. And I'm like, that's a funny thing to say. Like, it's understandable. Like, there's a fine line between like being arrogant as to be like, yeah, that's right. And then like being like, oh, golly gee. It's like, no, like, you guys have been around at least a little bit of time. Like, take that in a little bit. So
yeah, own it. Be confident with it. Okay. And it's not to say that Will Ramos is not confident. I mean, his voice is just, to me, it brought everything together. And it's cool because that's exactly what we talk about on First Look, right? I get the raw reaction of seeing this band for the first time. And then that next piece is being able to have the opportunity to see them live. So for me, it brought it all together. I was very satisfied. And for me, I was in a 9.5 for Lorna Shore. Where were you?
Yeah, I was right there with you. I think for me, it came a little bit lower. Admittedly, I think I was in like the 9.2 for them.
Okay. Yep.
And again, it's no fault of theirs. Like, I think they did as best they could with what they had. I thought that his ability to go from his vocals to like to talking between every set
pretty
was
amazing.
Seamless.
Yeah.
Again, and I know like it was really cool to see how well that presentation again presented itself to a live setting with the sunlight out, with a relatively like a crowd who was still just kind of getting there. Yeah, and he is, I mean, like, mind you, this is my first time seeing Lorna Shore live, but in the few things that I've seen of theirs, like from like other live videos and things like that, like, this is not tearing down anybody else to build somebody up. I truly believe that Will is their best vocalist. Like, we're not even just talking in terms of like quality of like skill or anything like that. It just seems like he has like an aura about him. And again, it comes back to that, like, oh, I'm kind of surprised. Like, there's like a almost like genuine nature to that guy. You know what I mean? And then if you see like his interviews and how he presents himself, like this kind of like semi-goofy kind of fun-loving guy who can also like turn it on at the drop of the hat and like bring you some of the most like gut-wrenching, guttural like vocals that you've ever probably heard. Like, it's pretty great.
I totally agree. And it was cool when we were buying the shirts, like you decided on Lorna Shore. So I thought that was Cool, you own that, and yeah, so we really liked Lorna Shore. Just resetting things for you. This is a special edition of First Look. This is my producer right here, Michael Kenobi, and we had the opportunity in late April to go see two of my favorite bands, Mastodon and Gojira, and we just finished talking about Lorna Shore, who was the opening band. So we'll talk about the middle band, which was Gojira, and this time around for the Deftones, they went kind of all over the map. This one, they really dialed in on Fortitude, which is their latest album. It was great because I knew what was coming to open up. They had the big curtain, they had the countdown, and then the curtain fell, and then wouldn't you know it, they come out with Born for One Thing. And it was absolutely just mind-blowing. It was great. Even the second time when I knew it was going to happen. Then they follow up with Backbone. They go Stranded. They go to one of my favorites, Flying Whales, The Cell, The Art of Dying. And then Fortitude got 4 of the 5 next songs, Grind and Another World, put Silvera in between that, followed up with Amazonia, The Chant, and then they finished off with The Gift of Guilt. And hands down, from start to finish, I always love watching this band play because where Will Ramos is definitely the star of the show for Lorna Shore. For Gojira, it's different. I feel like each guy kind of stands out on their own.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, although if I would pick a favorite, that drummer is hysterical.
Mario. Yep.
Yeah, he is hilarious. I intentionally, unintentionally, he's hard not to pay attention to. And for me, like, my score, I'm trying to think of what my scores were on the night, but like in reflection, I think across the board, I think Gojira had the best performance of the night.
Wow. Okay.
I hope that's
very
not
nice. Yeah. And see, that was good for me to hear because again, this was kind of your first experience with someone like Gojira. Here I am talking about it, kind of it's part of my setup and everything. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when I think you said 9.8. Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Yeah. Because I agree. I mean, they just bring it. They're very crisp. Flying Whales, like I said, that song in itself just blows me away. But yeah, good stuff. Okay. Yeah. Anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah. You got to love that moment, too, of like, what's the vocalist's name?
Joe. Yeah.
When Joe's like, hey, do you want to play a tour with Mastodon? He's like, are they the one? Do they have a whale on their artwork? Yep. All right, we're in. Like, he's just very, and to your point, they played, I don't know how many songs before he said a word otherwise outside of vocals. I
remember we looked at each other like, I'm like, okay, see, that's the difference right there.
Yes. Yep. Like he was very, like that whole band, again, they were just very like, this is us. This is who, like, again, we're Gojira and we're unapologetic. And like, again, even when he would talk, it was like super short, super brief. Hi, boom, next. Hey, Sacramento, nice to see you again. Boom, next. We're going to go into this next. Like there was no fat to trim off that set. It was just like concise beginning to end.
I think that's well said. And if you're a new metal fan, I encourage you, go check them out. Gojira on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever your streaming service is. And so we finish up with the headliner. And I have to tell you, it really made my heart happy. It really did, because what they did here is they took the best of the best, and yet they still had to leave things out. I mean, they've been doing this for 20 plus years, but they opened up, and we're talking about Mastodon, my band, The Wolf is Loose, which I think is incredible, and I believe they have not played in almost like 7 to 8 years. So this was the first time. So they broke out with it in Portland. There was a note that they were going to do it again. And of course they did. Then they come back with Crystal Skull, Megalodon, Divinations, Andromeda, and Sultan's Curse from the last, the Emperor of Sand. Then they did their new stuff, which they put 3 in a row. So they did Fallen Torches, Pushing the Tides, and More Than I Could Chew. More Than I Could Chew, I would say, of the 3 was not my favorite, but I'm glad they put it out there. And then they went right back to the classics. Aqua Dementia, Steam Breather, Iron Tusk, and then I really think my favorite kind of blend of songs started with Iron Tusk. So what they did is they blended 3 songs. They went Iron Tusk, March of the Fire Ants, and Mother Puncher. I mean, it was incredible. And then they finish out with Circle of Sasquatch. And of course, the epic, the anthem, Blood and Thunder was the finisher. It's like, I think that's 15 to 16 songs right there. And I'm telling you, it was one heck of a show.
Yes, it was. I think initially on the night of the set, I think that they actually were the ones who pulled the 9.8.
Yes.
And then I think Gojira was like pretty close, like 9.7, 9.6.
Right.
I would honestly just flip those or put them at one another. But I still think for me, like having the time of reflection, I still think Gojira had like the best set, but not taking anything away from Mastodon. Again, you could tell that they have done this for a long time, but that they still really like it. And to your point, like grouping the new songs together, it's almost like they're like, yeah, we know,
Right.
but we like these songs.
Yep.
So like, let's just get them out the way, and then we'll go back into like what everybody else seems to like.
Yeah, just like again, the classics. And it wasn't even a point of me like going, oh man, they didn't play this. Like I was so satisfied. And what it did for me is it just renewed how much I really do love the band.
Yeah.
You know, because I'd gone through this, you know, it's kind of, I guess you would call metal depression of like, is this the end of Mastodon? But after seeing them live, I'm like, no way. I mean, this is why they are really still at the top of their game.
Yeah, we kind of touched on it a little bit when we were at the show, and then when we were leaving too. It's like when you do love a band so much, and then like they start teasing that new record, and you're so excited. Like one of my favorite bands for many years was A Day to Remember, who we've covered here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they would always do this. They would release a single, and they would say, "This is the heaviest song we've ever made." And typically they were pretty right, and you were like, "This is great. This is fantastic." And then you would hear the rest of the album, and like there'd be one or two, and the rest of them were awful. Their last record, they had like one or two, again, solid songs. Everything else was terrible. And you're like, like
It's a disappointment.
yeah, you're like, okay, I waited years for this.
Right.
It's here. It's bad. Now I have to wait that many more years to see what they do again. It's a little tough.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because that's exactly how I felt when Hushed and Grim came out. Two of the three songs were the ones that they played that were the ones I could at least sink my teeth into.
Yeah.
And that was Fallen Torches and Pushing the Tides. And being able, you know what, I will say, because I did miss them, you know, on their tour, that I was like, okay, yeah, that, you know, like those sounded really good. And I'm glad those were the two that I picked out. And like I said, More Than I Could Chew was one I wasn't as familiar with, but I'm glad they threw that in there. So the representation of it all was great. And you and I, we were able to get our shirts afterwards. And by the way, thank you again. You bought my shirts. That was so awesome.
Of course,
I'm
you
so
bought the
excited
tickets.
for that. And
Yeah, you got it.
I actually got two, and I'm glad because, you know, a lot of times I will try to make every excuse, say, oh no, okay, I won't get a shirt. And like this time, I'm glad we did. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't say enough good things about that venue. Like they ran that thing like a well-oiled machine. Like
I agree.
there was, again, the sets of the bands were fantastic. The production was fantastic. This is one of the few concerts I've ever been to. Now, mind you, this will also speak to the fact that I've mainly gone to shows that were $5. This is the first time I've ever been to a show where like the vocalist wasn't like, "Hey, my mic's not working." And then like even when we were like, "Should we get merch?" and we looked at the line, we're like, "It's not that bad." And it was like boom, boom, boom. Like they were like getting people through. They even had like you could order like mobile pickup if you wanted. Like they were nailing it.
But I wouldn't have felt right doing it that way. You know, that's where you got to go old school.
No, I'm with you. Well, I mean, old school to an extent. I mean, main difference now, we don't take cash, and
That's
they
right,
got that
no
cool
cashier.
they flip that cool iPad around. They're like, and if you want it, there's going to be some info on the screen. Like, I know what this is. Like, you're asking for a tip. That's cool.
Right.
But like the lowest tip is like 20%. You're like, all right, cool, sure, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? I'm already here anyway. Why not?
So
But,
yeah, and let's finish this way because our seats were pretty amazing. Okay,
The best.
so Michael and I, if we had our druthers, we'd be in the pit. We would
That's
be
right.
up front. For some reason, when I went to go get these tickets, those were not offered, which meant they were probably sold out.
Yes.
And so there's the next section. Okay, so it's the A section. So I was able to get something in what would be the last row. So for me, I'm thinking, okay, there won't be anybody behind us. That'll work out pretty well. It actually worked out to be even better. So imagine this, there's A through V, and people are jammed together in seats. We were in W, which was the last row, and it was a single row that was above the A through V, but below the next section behind us with a gap in between.
Yep.
And it was you, me, and maybe three other people. We had it all to ourselves.
It was like balcony seats, except
Yeah.
they were front and center. if you couldn't be in the pit, it's where you would ever want to be. Like if we were 2 rows up, it would have still been enjoyable, but we would have been like this. Like we could have done this. Like we could have spread those arms out fully and not had an issue. And those 4 other people showed up for like the last band. Like we had most of that section to ourselves for like at least the first 2 bands. It was incredible. Incredible.
Yep.
Yeah,
and,
great scenes.
So much fun. And like I said, the drive down, drive back, everything was pretty flawless. And so overall, I'm going to give it just the whole experience. It truly was great. 9.8. I'm going to give it a 9.8.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, I will honestly say, so in driving down there, you asked me the best show I'd ever been to. This is it.
Wow.
9.9. 9.9.
Yeah, okay.
Because 10s, as we know from other shows, 10s are... It's impossible.
Well, it's interesting because, full disclosure, right? That's what we do here on First Look. I think after Gojira, I went 10.
Yeah.
Mastodon 10.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's what's great about a show is that, you get time to let it kind of resonate.
Yeah.
And then it gets better. And even though I went from a 10 to a 9.8 to fully do it, but it still was incredible. And the fact that you and I got to share that experience.
Yes. Cannot say thank you enough. Yeah, it was an absolute blast, and I'm ready for the next one. Also, too, for a moment, going back to that venue for a second. Also, the vent staff. Parking the cars, they were so friendly, and I'm sure that the holiday had something to do with it, but they were so nice. They're like, oh yeah, park there, sure.
Like, by the way, we didn't pay for parking.
Nope.
And that's a huge one. Now, you could get VIP and get a little bit closer, but I'll just let you know, general parking was not all that bad. And here's the other part, getting out, which is always a big thing, was not bad at all. So that really lends to this full experience that we're talking about. So Concord Pavilion, well done.
Yes, that's a go-to again, for sure.
Okay, so Mastodon, Gojira, Lorna Shore, they are still doing it. It's a 40-city tour. They brought it. Michael and I truly enjoyed it, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of First Look. Until next time, rock on.